Welcome back to StadiumRise, July 19, 2026. The final whistle blows at MetLife Stadium. Confetti falls. One nation lifts the trophy. And then, almost immediately, the most expensive, most logistically complex sporting event in human history begins to pack up and leave. The branding comes down, the temporary seats are dismantled, the natural grass, installed at enormous expense and effort across 11 NFL stadiums that had never grown it before, is ripped out and replaced with the artificial turf that the stadium owners actually want. The FIFA logos disappear, the World Cup names vanish, AT&T Stadium becomes AT&T Stadium again, SoFi becomes SoFi, MetLife becomes MetLife. And the question that football fans around the world are already asking, the same question that haunted Qatar for 3 years after 2022, arrives with force. What happens to these stadiums now? The answer, it turns out, is both completely boring and genuinely fascinating. And it tells you everything about why the 2026 World Cup was the most intelligent piece of tournament infrastructure planning football has ever produced. Start with the fundamental difference between 2026 and every World Cup that came before it. Qatar built 7 stadiums, essentially from scratch in a desert nation with no domestic football league capable of filling them. Brazil rebuilt the Maracanã and constructed new venues in cities like Manaus and Brasilia. A $500 million stadium in the Amazon rainforest. For a city with a club playing in Brazil's lower divisions, that reported operating losses within years of the tournament ending. Russia built or heavily renovated 12 stadiums, several in cities that had no meaningful football infrastructure before or after the event. The pattern was consistent and consistently catastrophic. Overbuild for 6 weeks, then spend the next decade managing the consequences. FIFA in 2026 broke that pattern entirely. Not a single new permanent stadium was constructed for this tournament, not one. Every match was played in a building that already existed, already had a tenant, already had a crowd, and already had a reason to be there after the final whistle of the World Cup final had faded from the New Jersey air. Jeff Keys, global events practice leader at Populous, the architectural firm that worked on 5 of the 16 World Cup 2026 venues, put it plainly in 2025. The argument for building less is simple. A stadium built to World Cup specification for a tournament that lasts 6 weeks will spend the remaining decades of its life carrying costs designed for an event it will never host again. Sometimes the legacy is what you don't leave behind. That philosophy is the architecture of what happens after July 19. Let us go venue by venue, because the stories are different and the details matter. MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. The venue that hosted the final has a busy August schedule waiting for it. The Giants and Jets both open their NFL preseason in early August. The natural grass installed for the World Cup, a project that required banning all other events from the stadium for approximately 10 weeks prior to the tournament, comes out within days of the final whistle. Artificial turf goes back in. The 1,740 corner seats that were removed and replaced with a modular steel system to widen the pitch to FIFA's required dimensions remain as they are. That change is permanent. MetLife Stadium's World Cup configuration, slightly smaller, slightly wider, is now its permanent configuration. The building that hosted the 2026 World Cup final is permanently, physically different from the building that existed before it. AT&T Stadium in Dallas, which hosted 9 matches, more than any other venue, goes back to being Jerry World. The Dallas Cowboys open their preseason in August. The natural grass comes out. The artificial turf returns. The stadium's operations director described the grass installation as one of the most technically demanding projects the venue had ever undertaken. 6 to 7 years of FIFA research went into how to grow warm-season grass hybrids in an enclosed, air-conditioned environment, and it lasts for 8 weeks before being replaced. But the changes to the broadcast infrastructure, the hospitality zones, the stadium technology, and the accessibility systems that were upgraded for the World Cup are permanent. AT&T Stadium is a better building after 2026 than it was before. SoFi Stadium in Inglewood is one of the most interesting post-tournament stories. The artificial turf that SoFi installed for its NFL tenants, the Los Angeles Rams and Los Angeles Chargers, had to be removed for the World Cup, replaced with natural grass, and will be reinstalled after July 19. The corner seats that were removed to widen the pitch to FIFA's required dimensions go back. The building returns to its $5.5 billion NFL configuration. But SoFi also demonstrated something during the World Cup that its designers had always insisted upon and critics had questioned, that its translucent fixed canopy floods the pitch with enough natural light to grow and maintain genuine grass, even in an enclosed California environment. That question has now been answered. SoFi can host football. It just chose not to for 32 weeks a year. In Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium reverts to its role as home of the Atlanta Falcons and Atlanta United. The Pantheon-inspired retractable roof closes over the grass, or rather, over the artificial turf that replaces it, and the building returns to the dual-use configuration it was designed for. Atlanta United, who play in MLS, will return to a stadium that was already theirs and is now, after its World Cup moment, one of the most recognized football venues in North America. Here is where the story gets genuinely unexpected. The World Cup installed natural grass in 11 NFL stadiums that normally use artificial turf. And the NFL players noticed. The NFL Players Association posted to social media during the tournament an image reading, "Player voices should shape their game from the ground up," with the word ground designed to look like grass. A survey showed that 92% of NFL players preferred natural grass. The New York Giants coach, when asked about the grass at MetLife Stadium just before the tournament began, refused to answer on record because he knew his answer would embarrass the league. NFL defensive lineman Harrison Phillips said it plainly. "The players prefer to play on natural grass. We would love if we could get to that." The World Cup did not just give 16 stadiums 6 weeks of football, it gave 11 NFL stadiums a live demonstration in their own buildings, watched by their own players, of what natural grass looks and feels like. Whether the NFL acts on that pressure in the years after 2026 is an open question. But the question is now louder than it has ever been. That is a legacy nobody planned and nobody anticipated. In Houston, NRG Stadium returns to the Houston Texans and the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, one of the largest annual events in the United States, which fills the venue for 3 weeks every spring. The climate-controlled retractable roof that made NRG one of FIFA's preferred venues for daytime summer matches in Texas returns to its normal function. The building that kept 72,000 World Cup fans cool during June and July will keep 72,000 rodeo fans comfortable in March. Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, which hosted USA versus Bosnia in the round of 32, Argentina versus Germany in the group stage, and multiple knockout matches, underwent a $200 million renovation in the 2 years before the World Cup, partly driven by the upcoming 2026 Super Bowl. That renovation delivered the largest outdoor 4K video boards in the NFL. The World Cup was, in a real sense, the dress rehearsal for the Super Bowl. After July 19, the 49ers return, the Super Bowl comes, and Levi's Stadium enters a period where it will host 2 of the 3 biggest sporting events in American culture within 12 months of each other. Lumen Field in Seattle returns to the Seahawks and the Sounders, the temporary natural grass, the $19. $4 million state-funded installation comes out. The artificial turf goes back in for American football. But the Seattle Sounders, who return to their home ground in August, play on grass. Their MLS schedule, when played at Lumen Field after the World Cup, will use whatever surface the Seahawks leave them. The Sounders have long advocated for natural grass at Lumen Field. The World Cup gave them a summer of it. Whether it stays is a negotiation that the Seahawks ultimately control. Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, home of the Kansas City Chiefs, never left its most essential purpose during the World Cup. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl in February 2026 and began their dynasty defense in September. In between, Arrowhead hosted 6 World Cup matches at the building that holds the Guinness World Record for loudest sporting crowd ever measured. The natural grass that replaced the turf was always temporary. When it leaves, the Chiefs return. And Arrowhead goes back to being what it has always been, the loudest outdoor sports venue on earth. Gillette Stadium in Foxborough returns to the Patriots. Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia returns to the Eagles. Hard Rock Stadium in Miami returns to the Dolphins. The F1 Miami Grand Prix, the Miami Open, and every other event that fills its calendar year-round. All of these buildings were never really borrowed by the World Cup. They were lent to it temporarily, improved by it permanently, and returned to their tenants in better condition than FIFA found them. In Canada, BMO Field in Toronto returns to Toronto FC of MLS and the Toronto Argonauts of the CFL, a ground that was expanded from 28,000 to 45. 736 for the World Cup and will now be reconfigured to a comfortable 40,000 seat capacity that makes it one of the largest football-specific stadiums in North America. BC Place in Vancouver returns to the BC Lions and the Vancouver Whitecaps. The retractable roof closes. The Pacific Northwest rain comes back. The snow-capped mountains remain exactly where they always were. In Mexico, all 3 venues continue exactly as they have for decades. Estadio Azteca, Estadio BBVA, and Estadio Akron simply host their next domestic football matches. The Liga MX season does not stop for the World Cup. It pauses around it. The season resumes in August. The clubs come back. The fans come back. The stadiums that hosted the opening match of the biggest World Cup in history go back to hosting Chivas de Guadalajara versus Cruz Azul on a Tuesday night. This is the 2026 legacy in its purest form, not a portfolio of abandoned cathedrals wondering what they are for. Not billion-dollar white elephants in cities too small to fill them. 16 buildings that were already working before June 11 and will be working again by August. Permanently improved by what FIFA required of them, not fundamentally changed by what they temporarily became. Qatar built for one event and spent years asking what comes next. The 2026 World Cup answered that question before it was ever asked. The legacy is not what was built. The legacy is what was already there and what it became. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. See you next week.